Right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Colin Campbell, and I'm the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Advertising Research. And it's a real pleasure to be here today and welcome you to a special edition of the ARF Insight Studio series. We're going to go today inside the Journal of Advertising Research and take a look at agencies in much more detail. We've got a great set of research, and the title of our event today is Ad Agency Intelligence, New Research on Agency Incentives, AI Integration, and Creative Attribute Effectiveness. We have an amazing set of speakers from around the world who'll be sharing recent insights that have been published in the Journal of Advertising Research. First up, we have Scott Koslow. He's a veteran of our Insight Studio series. He's a professor of marketing at Macquarie University down in Australia. He's a leading scholar in advertising creativity and strategy. He's collaborated with major brands and agencies, including Toyota, General Motors, BBDO, and Ogilvy and Mather. His research provides actionable insights into how agency incentives and client relationships influence creative outcomes. We're so thrilled to have Scott here, and he'll be presenting a paper titled How Do Advertising Agencies Respond to Incentives? Perceptions of Creativity and Competitive Account Reviews and Pay for Performance Compensation. He's doing this on behalf of his co-authors, one of which will be joining him later today for the Q&A, and that's Hugh O'Connor. He's a senior lecturer at the University of Waikato down in New Zealand, whose research examines how agency structure, team dynamics, and strategies shape advertising creativity. His work offers practical insights into how agencies manage the trade-offs between originality, effectiveness, and client expectations. So thank you so much, Scott and Hugh, for being here. Next up, I'd like to introduce Weila Cui. She's a PhD candidate at the University of Nottingham in Ningbo, China, and her research focuses on the integration of generative AI into ad agency workflows. Through qualitative studies, she examines how agencies adapt to technological changes, offering practical frameworks for human AI collaboration in creative processes. And she is presenting on behalf of her co-authors a paper titled Exploring the Integration of Generative AI in Ad Agencies, a co-creative process model for human AI collaboration. Very relevant to what we're seeing with the changes happening with Gen AI. So thank you so much for being here as well, Weila. And then finally, we'll be hearing from Gina Slako. She's an associate professor of marketing at Colorado State University. There, she specializes in consumer perception and sensory marketing, particularly from the food, beverage, and restaurant sectors. Gina's research employs large-scale data analysis and machine learning to identify which creative elements most effectively drive consumer engagement and purchase intent. And Gina, on behalf of her co-authors, will be presenting an article titled Designing Delicious, an examination of creative attributes driving food, beverage, and restaurant advertising effectiveness. And so we're thrilled to have you here as well too, Gina. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott, and we'll have him go through and tell us more about agency incentives. I'm very excited to hear about this.
Thanks, Colin. Now I'm just setting up my screen here. Um, the way you say it, I'm really excited um, to hear the other two papers because they all sound very interesting to me. Now, so what I'm going to be talking about today is how do agencies respond to incentives, perceptions of creativity and competitive account reviews, and pay for performance compensation. Now, I'm, of course, the author on the paper. Hugh's going to be with us in a few moments, or for the question and answer. Mark couldn't make it today. Sheila passed away a couple years ago. This was actually one of the last papers that she worked on before she passed away. So it's sort of a special paper in that way. Now, so the first question I need to ask, and this is a question a lot of people ask, how do we get the best work from advertising agencies? Now, for the most part, there's two traditions. Okay, now the tradition that's on the left, it's based on something called agency theory, and the idea is that there are clients, and they're usually called principals, or ad agencies, and they're just called agencies, and they somehow or another have to work together. Okay. There are a number, economists have been studying this stuff for years on how some agent engages with a client to do some kind of a work. And they talk about a whole bunch of different theoretical ideas. Moral hazard is a word that comes out of that, asymmetric information, and agency costs. Now, if you ask an economist, how do we sort of do the best kind of stuff in this kind of a framework, and they say problems are solved with good contracts, information systems, and monitoring. So you write everything down on paper, you get everybody to sign it, you have an information system to make sure that you're watching everybody and you're monitoring everyone. And sort of one of the assumptions is that, well, agents in general are sort of kind of lazy and they also don't want to take on risks. Now, what's funny about this is that when it comes to creativity, it seems like agencies will go to any effort and any length to be creative, and they're definitely not afraid of risk. Okay. So that's already given you a little bit sort of some assumptions that maybe this isn't going to work out so well. Now, but if you're following this economic approach, it's like, let's watch those agencies really closely, keep their iron to the grindstone here, and we'll put them in competitive account reviews so they're forced to do very good work, and we'll give them pay for performance compensation systems so they are very much forced. If they want the reward, they got to give you the performance, and that's sort of the mindset there. On the other hand, there's creativity theory. This suggests a different way. Now, creativity theory is based on one of the big effects. Rewards are well known to kill creativity. You offer somebody incentives and rewards, it kills creativity. Why it happens is because we're focused on intrinsic motivation. That is key. Okay. Here, problems are solved with collaboration, um, such that it allows the agency to do good work. If you want to improve things, you want to improve the process. People have to explore, and the critical thing is the clients have to explore because the agencies pretty much always want to do that. You know, got to be open, especially clients need to be open, and you have to trust. Okay, so those are sort of the two perspectives. Which approach is correct? Well, the unfortunate thing is the empirical results are equivocal. Largely, nobody can quite sort of justify and find numbers to support the economic kind of approach. And, you know, that's what we're here to find out a little bit more about. Now, what we're going to show empirically is applying the extrinsic motivation approach, which is these incentives, account reviews, pitches, and so forth, and that does technically work, and that's put in quotes. But using intrinsic motivation or collaboration works better. And we're going to go through some details of two natural experiments. All right. So that's what we're going to show. Now, the underlying data is drawn from a very large established data set. Okay. So the underlying data, 1,000 advertising campaigns from London, Sydney, Melbourne, and Auckland. Now, each ad agency, it's only ad agencies who respond to this, report on 3 campaigns. We select out subsets of this 1,000 campaigns with certain characteristics. We don't want to end up with too skewed independent variable. If you do that, a lot of statistical problems tend to happen. So we're going to take subsets where these kinds of behaviors seem pretty common. Okay. For each respondent, there's 1 or 2 campaigns that they have for treatment and 1 or 2 for control. So every single respondent's going to have some campaigns that have the treatment and some that don't. We're going to fit a multi-level model, and the results, therefore, are within subject. Now, so for study 1, competitive account reviews, through 192 campaigns, 64 respondents, London, Sydney, Melbourne, Auckland, and from those 64 respondents, 72 new account pitches. All right. For performance study, the second study, we have 132 campaigns given to us by 44 respondents. Again, it's London, Sydney, Melbourne, Auckland, and 63 of those 132 campaigns are pay per performance accounts. So 2 subsets with regards to these studies. Now, these 2 models are going to predict 3 things. We're going to predict originality, we're going to predict strategy, and we're going to predict creativity. Now, creativity is something that if you're high on both originality and strategy at the same time, then we're going to call it creative. So just one of the 2 dimensions that are separate, and then the 2 things together. Okay, this is the basic idea of the model, especially the agency theory kind of model with regards to the value of account reviews or pitches. So somehow or another, the use of competitive account reviews leads to more original, more strategic, and more creative ads. Now, this needs to be contrasted with a slightly different kind of model. And that model is there's two intervening steps that are really critical. One of the intervening steps is client willingness to explore. Okay, that somehow or another that sits in between the use of competitive account reviews and the originality, strategy, and creativity of the campaign. It can also be whether or not the agency decides to run with their first choice of work. Um, so that's a slightly different model, that there isn't really a direct effect from competitive account reviews to originality, strategy, and creativity. It's intervened by two different measures, okay? And this is called a mediation model. Now, what's the data? Now, forgive the complicated slide. There's a lot of data here. I'll walk through this stuff in a little bit of detail, and I think the bar on the right is going to cover up a little bit of it. Sorry. So what we've got here is we have two particular significant effects. Now, this is the baseline kind of model. We have new business pitches on the left, and it causes both originality and creativity. There's a strong positive effect. We didn't quite get the positive effect for new business pitch on strategy, but you'll see that come back in a few moments. So that's the basic model. If that's all the measures we had, would say, of course, new business pitch is going to work. However, we then add in first choice of create that the agency is allowed to chooses to go with their first choice of creative, and clients are willing to explore. And all of a sudden, the effects are very significant, and the new business pitch thing drops out of the model. Okay, so it's these other two variables that matter, not new business pitch. Oops. Now, if we instead just check, new business pitch does cause the agency to go with their first choice of work, and new business pitch also leads to clients are willing to explore. So this overall is the final model. It's not a direct effect. Real quick on the second study, the basic model is pay for performance compensation, leads to more original and strategic creative. The important thing is trust. If you don't trust your client, it might be that, or if your agency does not, if your client does not trust the agency, possibly there's a positive effect between these two things. But if the client trusts the agency, there may be no effect. Now, that pretty much is what we see. Now, I show you for the results for creativity. It's only one of the three measures. The other two happen the same way. We have on the left the no that doesn't pay for performance. On the right, the client does pay, is paid, the agency is paid on performance. The blue line is the low trust condition. The dotted red line is the high trust condition. Yeah, if you don't trust your agency, sure, it's a great thing to use pay for performance, but better is a situation in all cases where trust is high. So to summarize, competitive account reviews do work, okay? But they work because clients are more open to exploring and agencies do less self-editing of what may potentially be risky work. Maybe in all situations, clients should explore with their agency and help the agency feel safe to present their best work. We also show pay for performance compensation works. Yes, we find the overall effect, but the interaction is that if you but it's only if you don't trust your agency in the first place. Maybe clients need to either build trust with their agencies or find one that they can trust. So that pretty much is my presentation, and I will stop sharing now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. We're going to turn now to Weila, and we'll take a look in more detail at AI collaboration.
Thanks for the opportunity to share our research on generative AI integration in advertising agencies. I'm presenting today on behalf of my co-authors Martin Yu and Weizhi Yuan from the University of Nottingham, Ningbo, China. We started our research in October 2023. Let me begin with the reality we were seeing in the advertising industry at that time. text-to-image AI tools were rapidly transforming visual content creation. But we were also witnessing creative professionals who feared job displacement, legal uncertainties around AI-generated content, and a lack of frameworks for effective human-AI collaboration. The literature presented contradictory views on AI's role in creativity. Some scholars argue that AI augments creativity by handling repetitive tasks, while others suggested that it might limit our imagination through what they call filter bubbles that homogenize creative output. What we didn't know and what motivated our research were fundamental questions. How do creative processes actually change when agencies adopt these technologies? And what does successful human-AI collaboration look like in practice? These gaps in empirical knowledge were particularly interesting because advertising industry provides a very unique context, a place where creativity, technology, and client service intersect in very complex ways. We adopted a qualitative approach designed to capture the complexity of this evolving phenomenon. Our study used a two-phase approach. We had a preliminary interview phase, that is to scope the phenomenon and refine our focus, followed by extensive investigation with key informants. Our final sample comprised 20 advertising practitioners across China, representing agencies ranging from small boutiques with only 5 employees to large multinational companies with over 100 staff members. Participants had extensive professional experience, ranging from 3 to 25 years in advertising, and varying levels of AI experience, from 4 to 60 months. We deliberately included diverse roles: designers, creative directors, founders, and account managers. For data collection and analysis, we had about 300,000 words of interview transcripts, supplemented by field observations at agencies, and also internal company documents. We used theoretical sampling to maximize variation, actively seeking both AI enthusiasts and skeptics to avoid bias. We used the elements of grounded theory with Julia methodology and member-checking validation to ensure rigor, conducting interviews until we felt that we reached theoretical saturation. Our analysis reveals a 4-stage co-creative process model. Stage 1 is readiness, which involves 3 interdependent factors. The first one is adaptive mindset. Practitioners should view AI as a collaborative partner rather than a threat. We had designers who said they wanted to embrace this new development and didn't want to fall behind. The second one is contextual awareness. That is to understand AI's impact on advertising context through active experimentation with those tools. The third one is technological competence. That is developing skills in prompting, fine-tuning, and navigate different generative AI systems. Stage 2 introduces the co-creativity loop, which has 3 components. Co-inspiration provides divergent exploration and idea expansion, with AI serving as a catalyst for creative possibilities. Co-generation involves collaborative creation with iterative enhancement. One practitioner described the serendipitous nature of AI-generated content that introduces unexpected creative directions. Co-collaboration is the convergent phase, where humans and AI work together to create a unified and enriched final output. Stage 3 is validation, and this is primarily a human-led phase. There is an agency review loop focusing on artistic merit assessment, ethical considerations, and copyright verification. There's also a client review loop, ensuring strategic alignment and brand consistency. Stage 4 is execution and feedback loop, creating a continuous learning cycle. This includes technical optimization for cross-platform adaptation, quality enhancement, and file format standardization. It also involves cross-functional collaboration among creative teams, technical experts, legal professionals, and clients. Most importantly, knowledge transfer occurs through internal prompt libraries and also specialized different approaches. We found multiple agencies that have constantly updated internal networks and sharing sessions, where they collect, categorize, and disseminate prompts. We've also uncovered very significant challenges that practitioners had to navigate at that time. We documented, for example, psychological resistance, where designers felt that their value was greatly reduced, would realize that they had to reflect on their roles. We also found technical limitations where practitioners struggled with AI's unpredictability and control issues. Sometimes it could be very difficult for them to achieve the desired results, and that could lead to very serious frustration. Legal uncertainties also created substantial barriers, with agencies expressing copyright concerns about the training data and also their hesitation to discuss AI use openly with clients due to these ambiguities. Based on our findings, we have 3 key implications for practitioners. The first one is to enhance organizational readiness by addressing psychological resistance through transparent communication, create hands-on experimentation opportunities, and consistently view AI as a collaborative partner. The human elements remain central. While we found cases where agencies reduced their numbers of employees, we also found examples where proper readiness preparation led to effective human-AI collaboration. Secondly, establish structured processes that balance AI's rapid ideation capabilities with essential human oversight. Develop clear protocols for human-AI interaction, and implement robust validation procedures that address both technical quality and ethical considerations. The third one is to foster continuous feedback loops by systematically documenting AI experiences and building internal knowledge base. Create learning systems that improve over time, with feedback connecting execution insights back to readiness preparation. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions. Please feel free to contact us if you would like further discussion.
Thank you so much, Weila. Really appreciate your presentation. And we're on to our final presenter, Gina. And before as Gina gets set up, I also want to encourage anybody who's watching who has questions, feel free to please throw those in the Q&A box. We'll be going to Q&A after, and we'd love to see any questions you might have and try to answer those as well. And I'll turn it over to Gina now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Gina Slako, Associate Professor of Marketing from the Colorado State University College of Business. And today I'm excited to share highlights from our paper, Designing Delicious. This project is a collaboration between researchers in academia, Ryan Elder, Jeff Dotson, and myself, and industry, Ariane Pohl, who is the Global Head of Research and Data Science for Product Solutions at Google. And today I'm going to focus on the practical implications for advertising effectiveness, particularly in food, beverage, and restaurant, or FBR. And we'll touch on how the work contributes to scholarly research in advertising and consumer behavior. So practically speaking, FBR advertising represents approximately 60% of total US advertising spend, with companies such as Nestle, PepsiCo, and McDonald's spending over $3 billion in worldwide advertising annually. However, despite this level of investment, the efficacy of certain creative attributes remains an industry question, and also one that scholars continually examine. And while scholarly research has explored this topic using a variety of approaches, we're generally restrained by the constraints of showing internal validity through lab experiments or many times just data availability. However, given the data availability and coding capabilities made possible by this particular collaboration, we're able to address this question more thoroughly. And in particular, our aim in this research was to answer the key question of which creative elements in FBR video advertising actually drive brand lift, and which ones are potentially overused and maybe ineffective. In this research, we examine how different creative attributes in FBR video advertising uniquely affect brand marketing funnel outcomes. We call these, the marketing funnel outcomes are ad recall, brand awareness, consideration, favorability, and purchase intent. And just as a point of clarification, as I move through the methodology and the modeling, when I say consumer response or the dependent variable or brand lift, I'm referring to these five, and they are measured independently. And second, in doing so, we identify the underutilized creative attributes that most effectively impact these outcomes, as well as those that might be minimally or negatively effective on consumer response. So our methodology, I'll go through the independent variables and the dependent variables, and then our modeling approach. This was really exciting for especially the scholars on this research team to have access to this type of data. And as another point of clarification, when I say we moving forward through the methodology and the modeling, this was done on Google's end. So while there are some details that I can share, I'm sharing what has been published in the paper in particular. So we looked at over 2,000 video ads shown globally on YouTube, and the ads were shown through TrueView skippable ads and bumper unskippable ads with an average duration of 43 seconds. So by answering or asking the question of which creative attributes affect consumer response, we're really just asking the question, what are all those little creative attributes or elements within these advertisements that are driving those responses? And so we had to go through kind of a rigorous coding and methodology for identifying all those creative elements. And we did that through both human coders and also machine learning, where hundreds of creative features across these advertisements were identified. And you'll see a set of these in the results section, but you can, which I will show in subsequent slides, but you can think of this as being, were humans present? Was the food present? Was it coming out of the packaging? Was it consumed during the advertisement? For how long? Was the logo of the brand present? So many different creative attributes that were coded across all of these advertisements. To identify which ones that we were going to focus on, input from advertisers, sellers, and creative agencies provided a taxonomy of general categories and specific types of advertising features. And these were included into a code book that Ipsos coders then used and were trained until using kind of an iterative process until they reached 90% accuracy. And in addition to this, machine learning tools proprietary to Google were also used to identify other elements, like whether a logo was present, whether a face of a human was present, and for how long. So those were the features of our model, or the independent variables, all of those creative elements. And then we wanted to map that to our outcome of interest, which is consumer response, or those what we call brand lift measures, and they were obtained through asking these questions in pre-roll surveys that were distributed after people saw the ad approximately 1 day later. So the ads that we analyzed were tied to brand lift surveys, giving us the ability to evaluate effectiveness across these funnel outcomes. And once these questions were asked, those data were translated into the dependent variable, the key dependent variable, which is Google's brand lift metric, which is also known as headroom lift. And it's asking the question, out of the people that we could possibly influence, how many did we actually move? And what that possibility is a comparison to a control group where people did not see that particular creative element. And so if brand recall is at a baseline of 20%, it creates a harder hurdle for people to overcome to see movement. And so the headroom lift measure accommodates for that. And so for each of those 5 marketing funnel outcomes, we had a headroom lift score for each of those. So we have our independent variables, which are the ad features, and we have our dependent variable, which is the headroom lift measures. And those were put into a rule fit model. The rule fit model works really well with large data sets like these. It provides predictive accuracy while also being very interpretable. It helps uncover interactions that might not be obvious, especially when you're dealing with hundreds of features. And it's also the standard tool used by Google's creative effectiveness group, which means that we like seeing how our results can align with what industry may be doing in practice. The rule fit model is sort of an ensemble model that works in 2 stages. First, it uses decision trees that identify which features and combinations of features are predictive of our brand lift measures. And then it fits those to a simple regression model that helps us interpret which features or combinations matter the most. And I like to think about that outcome of the model very similar to what you would see in a regression model. So the output of the model is what's called a partial dependence score. And it tells us whether a specific feature like a close-up shot or the sound of a crunch of food tends to increase or decrease predicted brand lift. And again, when I say brand lift, I mean each of those 5 different marketing funnel measures. So what we did to kind of create some taxonomy or organization around our findings is we mapped how often a creative cue occurred in our sample of advertisements, and then how effective it was. And we did this, and the effectiveness could have occurred for awareness, but maybe not purchase intent. So when I go through the results, we'll see we've mapped them into an area where we can see, well, maybe something that is highly utilized actually has a very low or even negative partial dependence score, which you might want to be cautious of, practically speaking. And then we can also see those that are potentially underutilized. So there are opportunities for underutilized but highly effective creative cues as reflected by a higher partial dependence score. So then, of course, they are normalized so that we can compare across funnel outcomes. In addition, to kind of help build some structure around this, we divide or use a three category approach to organizing the data. We look at the food cues, which might just be showing food, the benefits of the product or sensory elements of the product. We then have human focused cues, those maybe faces, characters, whether there's celebrities or influencers present, and then a food and human interaction, potentially the consumption of food in the ad or the use of food out in the street or in a restaurant, as you'll see. So let's go through the results. And you'll see over here, we have our 5 brand lift measures color-coded. We have occurrence on the bottom and our partial dependence effects up here. I'll kind of walk you through some of the more notable findings, and there's a lot to look at. You can certainly find this in the paper as well. But interestingly, elements like the sound of a crunch had some of the highest scores for ad recall and consideration, yet only appeared in 5% of the ads. Zooming in on the product features, especially in the last 5 seconds, also significantly boosted favorability and purchase intent, but not all food cues worked. So mentioning calories or stacking multiple health claims actually had negative effects on, as reflected by lower partial dependence scores. As for human cues, we see that direct eye contact with the viewer increased purchase intent, young adult characters improved recall, but the use of celebrities not interacting with the product actually hurt effectiveness, which we thought was really interesting. And one big finding was that ads with 3 or more people significantly boosted consideration. And, there are reasons why this might occur. And of course, this is where kind of the scholarly implications are for us. We're interested in kind of finding out why and explaining these. So that's kind of an exciting finding for us to further explore. And where we really find some really exciting, interesting outcomes are in the human and food interaction. So here you can see that showing the product used in the street or a restaurant setting had the highest impact on consideration and purchase intent. Depictions of eating or drinking also performed very well, but were surprisingly underused. And so these types of cues point to kind of these immersive, real lived experiences that might help consumer or viewers of the ad kind of imagine or simulate on the products themselves. And so, there's a lot of data here, but I think kind of what we can do with all of this from a practical perspective, or what practitioners, use more elements that work, or reassess what might not work. And also keeping in mind that you can customize by different funnel stages. So different features might be better for awareness, recall, or maybe others would be more effective for intent stages. And then academically speaking, like I said before, asking why we see these effects, especially in the sensory areas, which are really important and interesting to the research team. But by using advanced modeling, which is grounded in real ad performance, we're offering practical guidance to brands and agencies, but also this really nice roadmap for scholars who want to continue exploring this creative science behind great advertising. So thank you all, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you so much, Gina, for a really interesting presentation and a great analysis. I want to invite all the speakers back for the Q&A, as well as Hugh as well. And I also want to encourage anybody who has questions, who's in the audience, please feel free to use the Q&A box, and please put in anything that you might want to ask more about, or any questions that come to you. So thank you to all the speakers again for the great presentations and really interesting insights that you shared. I want to turn to Scott first, and you had a really interesting analysis, and I love the data set that you've got, Scott, and that you went through and took a look at, you and Hugh. And I'd like to go through and just ask a bit more about like what sort of general advice or what sort of key takeaways do you have for brands that are trying to motivate their agencies? They want to motivate them, but they don't want to stifle creativity. So what should they go through and do if that's what they're trying to achieve?
Well, I mean, first thing is, you got to trust your agency. If you can't trust your agency, game's over. Find something better. Either learn to trust them or find somebody else. So the other effects, it's like you want to excite your client or your agency. You have to be open to exploring. I mean, got to do that. And the other is tell the agency, we want to see your best work. It might scare us. We'll get over it. Show us your best stuff. Two things.
Yeah, so open them up, let them know that you're okay seeing stuff that might be a bit edgy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything you want to add, Hugh, or yeah.
Um, Agencies really love to work with competent people. Let's put it that way. We've found that in some of our other studies. We talk about sophistication, and this can sort of come down to that, even the selection of the agency style as well as, what are you trying to buy? What are your objectives, and you're able to do. So if you can come in and you understand what your role is as a marketer, it will be open and honest about that, even with your agency. If you're not quite sure where you are, say, hey, we've got a deficiency here. The agency wants to do the best work and do the best work for you, uh, like a therapist does. And if you don't come in, then they've got to start doing a whole lot of work to break down those areas, and that's a lot of their own resource that is not then focused on solving your external problem.
Hmm. Oh, very interesting. Oh, thank you for that. Yeah. Next up, we'll turn to Weila. So I've got a question for you about your really interesting presentation looking at that model, which talks about all the different processes or all the different stages involved in the process of integrating Gen AI. I have one looking at just what should agencies think about when they're considering where Gen AI fits into the creative process. There's a whole bunch of different points that it could be used. It could be used across all of them or just selective ones. Are there any considerations that I think they should be thinking about when they're trying to decide where it fits in?
Right. I think the first one is to assess the organizational readiness at the beginning of the model, which has three dimensions. And the first one is the mindset. That's the cognitive ability to embrace generative AI that can lead into more creative and adaptive outcomes. And the second one would be the contextual awareness. That's to understand which tasks and projects can benefit the most for your agencies from AI integration and setting the boundaries and preserving your own identity. And the third one would be the technological competence. That's the skill gap that to ensure that your teams have the necessary skills. And also the robust validation process is very important to ensure that your AI generated content can meet the client's strategic objectives and legal requirements. And lastly, consider have a knowledge sharing platforms or some kind of repository space for best user case that can guide future projects.
Thank you. Gina, I'm really impressed as well too with the data set that you explored and the modeling that you did. And it was great to see as well that, really detailed set of slides you've got as well, looking at, all the different effectiveness of different creative attributes. I'm wondering, just sort of, overlaying that with what you and your team understand about how food, beverage, and restaurant advertisers work. What are some different instincts that, advertisers might have that your results kind of run counter to, or suggest that perhaps they should be careful around, listening to or sort of working with?
Yeah, so I think, one instinct might be to kind of default to more traditional memory effects like showing, or brand effects like showing a logo at the very end and kind of relying on those memory mechanisms, or listing a lot of product benefits or emphasizing health claims, which we're seeing in food, beverage, restaurant might actually be changing either due to macroeconomic trends in or macro trends in kind of health and nutrition. But what was really interesting is that also the instinct to rely heavily on celebrities or influencers without a real clear connection to the food also kind of falls flat. So there has to be sort of this almost like this human connection for it to work if you're going to incorporate human presence in ads, and also, noting that we are in a kind of a very sensory rich space. Food, beverage, restaurant is inherently sensory because, it includes all the senses. And so imagining the taste and kind of leaning into some of those sensory dimensions might be not something that they would consider right away. So.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting set of ads to take a look at. I was thinking about all the fast food ones and things like that that come on, right? They're very appealing, right? And there are a whole bunch of different triggers they're trying to use to get us to, go and buy from those particular, brands. Yeah. Okay, so popping back to Scott and Hugh, I'm wondering if we jump to the procurement side, what can procurement teams do to better align with the creative goals that they're looking for during agency selection?
Well, that's going to be real key, is that you have that kind of chemistry, you have that kind of understanding. I mean, it's not going to be on the economic kind of stuff. It's going to be, can you work with these people? Um, you know, do they ask the right questions? Do they interact with you well? Are they trying to solve the problem? They may not be suggesting the approach that you've been thinking about doing, but the point is that they suggested approach, and just don't focus on the money. Focus on, are we doing good work together?
I guess that's the other aspect is marketing and procurement might be nicely aligned inside the organization, but if marketing has its objectives really well set, then make sure procurement do understand that and then understand why you're procuring an agency. Again, the old thing is if you are approaching advertising agencies to say, let's make an advertisement, that's not the same as approaching them and saying, we need to grow in this manner through this group of customers. Having that strategy built into briefing for the procurement people.
Yeah. You talked about trust as well too, and I'm wondering, is that something that they should be prioritizing when they're looking to select an agency as well? Is that something that perhaps is more important than cost or other different factors? Like, are there other different cues they should be sort of, looking out for or being really particularly aware of?
Well, it's interesting. Hugh made sure we put in a really great quote from some industry folks towards the end saying, look, money doesn't even top the top 5 or 6 factors that lead to people being or agent clients being happy with the work. It's not there. Don't focus on that. Focus instead on the process. Focus on the chemistry. Focus on do you trust these people? Can you work with these people? If they take you down a path that you don't feel comfortable with, are you able to sort of say, we're not sure about this. Talk us through this. Not sort of get rid of it, the idea, but give us a little bit more base on this. Give me a little bit more context. Okay. Try to show me how this is going to work. So those kinds of things. Work with the agency. Everybody's going to be happier. You focus on the money, I don't think anybody's going to be happy.
Interesting. Yeah. Jumping back to Weila, I'm wondering as somebody who's studying AI usage in advertising, are there any sort of early signals or signs you're seeing that AI enhanced teams produce more effective campaigns than ones that don't use AI?
Well, yeah, I think there are a few indicators. The most obvious one would be efficiency gains. So if the agency has realized dramatic reduced time from ideation to visualization, for example, and also the ability to explore, say, 10 times more creative directions in the same time frames or faster iteration cycles based on clients' feedback. And also, creative expansion would be another indicator. I think one of the interviewees said they are creating different personas to help them to generate ideas that they would not have thought on their own. So that's the serendipitous discovery aspect. But also, effectiveness require balance. So pure efficiency metrics maybe don't tell the whole story.
Mm,
Maintaining those essential human touch is just as important as the speed and scale that AI can provide.
yeah. Interesting. I like those insights. Yeah. I always say that I think that the best uses of AI are ones we don't notice, right? It sort of
Yeah.
looks seamless. You don't really see that. It doesn't sound like it was written by AI or made by AI, but it just looks good. It looks like high quality work. Yeah.
Yeah. But some agencies that they think a touch of humanness, maybe their imperfect bit would actually be more human, more authentic. So maybe sometimes to being too perfect might not be the best option.
Yeah, that's awesome. Interesting. Yeah. Turning back to Gina as well, one of the big challenges always with advertising is you want your ads to be distinctive, but at the same time, you want them to have broad appeal. Any sort of advice that your results shed light on in respect to that?
Yeah, I think the question about distinctness is interesting because it kind of begs the question, on what factor. So, I think what our research points to is that depending on what you want that outcome to be, whether it's a memory for the brand or to run out and, or pick up Grubhub and put in an order for food, what is it that you want your viewer to achieve? Do you want them to remember your ad? Do you want them to be able to point it out on a shelf at point of purchase, or do you want them to make that immediate purchase because you've created this very kind of this imagery rich depiction of food, like you mentioned, through fast food restaurants, which do such a great job of that. So the question is, well, then, so what? You've created a really distinct ad, but did it actually achieve what you had hoped that it would achieve in terms of purchase or just driving awareness for the brand? So I think our research points to it has to be, distinction without purpose or without some guidance really isn't effective, but creating something that is really tied to those KPIs is what advertisers should focus on.
So really kind of balancing both of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. No, thank you. Okay, so we've got a question from an attendee. This might be I'm guessing maybe more Weila, maybe Scott, Hugh, but of course anybody can jump in. How might the use of artificial intelligence affect remuneration or how you pay agencies? And it says like in the
This
past, agencies use, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Time as a metric is not
Yeah.
necessarily the best measure here, but it's one of the tangibles that people use throughout any of the sort of external agency consulting world as well. So some form of value-added fees, or I know you can always use some sort of market share percentage as well. Could be the method. The point is you're buying a set of expertise developed over a long period of time that need to be tapped in through a relational basis with your agency as well to get that best work. Um, Charging for that, yeah, it's it's going to be a difficult one. Scott,
It's tough, right? Yeah, I mean, if we're moving to using more AI and suddenly it becomes a lot
mm,
faster to create ads, do the prices go down or do they still charge the same prices? And if so, do we have to kind of evolve that model for how things build? Yeah.
that's that argument. It's partly to do with the in-house as well. Bringing uh, an agency in-house to increase that efficiency level and therefore have maybe less expense from an external agency. Again, this is asymmetric information in the contract relationship. And if we use AI and say, well, that makes everything a lot shorter and tighter, and so you're just using AI, you're forgetting the fact that there's a lot of expertise that have gone into the thought process in advance of that, the strategy building process to say, right, this is where we need to be, who we target, to feed into the prompts and then to also recognize when you have something that is creative and is going to do the job.
Yeah. Wayla or Scott, did either of you want to jump in as well? I don't know if it came up in your interviews or not, Wayla, talking about, compensation models or
Yeah, actually, one of the interesting insight on this topic is that I think agency is not actually reducing the price, even though they are using generative AI, and obviously the labor cost has reduced. But from our clients' side, they are expecting agencies to reduce the price. Once they've discovered that the agencies are using generative AI. So that's interesting contradiction between those two, and I can think it's kind of related to power dynamics as well. As I think it depends on the kind of the power that the clients and the agencies have at some point.
very interesting. Yeah. Okay, let's jump back to Gina as well. So what implications do your findings have for creative testing and pre-launch evaluation?
Oh, good question. Yeah, so I think it's actually I love kind of talking about the AI work because I think this creates sort of a new tool where you can start doing a little bit more pre-testing in on kind of all these different outcomes. So maybe using the effectiveness occurrence framework is just sort of a starting point to see where you are and what sort of creative attributes you're using and on what outcomes you're hoping, and kind of seeing where you can kind of generate some new opportunities. And with AI, even in scholarly research, we're able to sort of test things a little bit faster now and kind of get that proof of concept. And I think probably agencies are leaning into that far more heavily than maybe scholars are, just given kind of the constraints that we have with publishing and such. But I think it's a really great tool to be able to explore some of those different quadrants and see where your ads are falling.
Thank you. Yeah. And so like our final question, we'll bounce back to Scott and Hugh. And then so I'm really curious, what are some of the practical takeaways from your research for agencies that are pitching, right? So pitches are always high stakes. What are some practical takeaways for them? How can they, try to get, brands on board or, clients on board, or what should they be looking to do, or what should they be looking to achieve, or any sort of tips you might have for them?
Okay, the big thing is they got to work with the client to get the strategy and get a good one. Now, you know, one of the things about strategy, it's clients have them, but they have a lot of trouble articulating them. So you got to learn this. What are they telling you? How are they telling you this? Um, so you want to work with them and get that kind of good relationship so you can pull the strategy out. It might be that there's a knot of problems that they've got. Well, you can't solve 6 problems in one ad, okay? You got to untangle this knot. What's a problem you can do something about? But that's working with the client and it's getting from them what you need, okay? Now, if that's said, okay, please do not self-edit what you present to the client, okay? You can say, this might be risky. Okay, that's fine. Still present it, okay? If you just sort of say, oh, this is too risky, they'll never buy it, and it'll just scare them away, okay? You're setting yourself up for failure. Do not do this.
Yeah, very good advice. Yeah, anything to add, Hugh, or has Scott summarized that well? Yeah.
Yes, that's the other thing. Yeah, pitch processes come in different forms. If it's one that is with the agency held at arm's length, maybe walk away. If you're not feeling it and you're working too hard to make that strategy fit, the old rule is always you have to go back and do more. Well, again, it might be easier to leave that process and look for work elsewhere. The client's not ready for what you have to offer.
Yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow sometimes, but probably very good advice. Yeah.
Mm.
Cool. Well, thank you everybody for attending, and thank you, of course, to our speakers. It was a real pleasure having you, Gina, Weila, Scott, and Hugh. You can, of course, take a look at their work in the Journal of Advertising Research. I believe it's in both of the issues two most recent issues we've had that have come out. And if you have any questions, all the speakers are open to you reaching out to them as well too. So thank you again for coming. We really appreciate everyone being here today, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. And thank you again to the speakers. Oh, and one final thing, we've got a couple plugs as well too for upcoming ARF events. On July 9th, we have the Cognition Council, Defying Gravity, How Brands Stand the Test of Time. July 16th, the AI series, Can Barriers to Early Concept Testing Be Removed? And on July 30th, the Young Pros, The Power of Humor and Memes in Marketing. Sounds especially interesting. So again, thank you everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your day.